our objectives are going to be to understand the benefits and the limitations of blockchain-enabled decentralization. We're going to learn how to think about blockchain in a wider context of innovation and the process of creative innovation and destruction. Our focus areas will include why are blockchains considered so revolutionary? What is the real underlying promise of the distributed ledger technology, and how can this promise materialize in specific applications? Which of the many application areas of blockchain hold the most promise for the future? What differentiates truly disruptive from simply interesting blockchains? And is tokenization the future of blockchain? So what are the main use cases of tokenization and why are they considered so innovative? Our agenda is we're going to go through moving towards a decentralized world, innovation in the process of creative destruction, disintermediation, cyber mediation, tokenization, and from there, follow up with our conclusion. So, start moving towards a decentralized world. So, centralization is the dominating thesis. It's at the foundation of most governments, literally, well, I would say almost all governments, as well as a plethora of other institutional systems we have in place. So the Oxford Dictionary defines centralization as the concentration of control of an activity or organization under a single authority. So you can think of centralization as a pyramid, and everything flows to the top. All direction order comes from the top, flows down. So almost all record keeping is centralized or semi-centralized. Trusted record keepers keep a transaction and status track. Banks, financial transactions, and account balances are an example. Land registries, real estate transactions, and asset owners, etc. Centralization is actually so prevalent that we take it for granted. Most ledgers, which are a record of transactions, they're centralized with a trusted record keeper. So you can think of your bank account transactions, your academic certificates, your company's registration data, the ownership records of corporate securities, the list of title deed holders at your land registry office, your medical data, the names of passengers on flights, the records relating to your citizenship, such as your national ID number. These are all ledgers that are kept in centralized systems. What's wrong with centralization, you ask? Record keepers must be trusted. The people keeping record of these centralized systems, they must be trusted. If they're not trusted, then that creates an SPF, or a single point of failure. Meaning that if that system goes down, or if that individual is not trusted, or if it's compromised, then everything else falls right after. It's a domino effect. So record keepers are gatekeepers. They control who can participate in the system and what transactions take place. They control who has access to that data. Record keepers are SPFs, single points of failure. They may lose records, they may be hacked, they may cease functioning due to force majeure. And research has shown that large size of individual firms, such as banks, is a source of systemic risk. We're moving towards a decentralized world. Let me quickly have my trusty whiteboard here. We're going to quickly draw up visual representation, what a decentralized system would look like. You can imagine as this circle here is the top. And from there, all the orders flow downward. Just as anything going on down here or below must flow upwards, and the individual up top has all the power. This individual or centralized entity has all the power, makes all the decisions, and everyone else follows according to what the centralized system up top decides. Okay. Or if you'd imagine as a centralized system being a single leg, let's say a table, it has a single leg in the middle. You can imagine that. So that's a single point of failure. table gets pushed too hard in one direction, the whole table is falling over. We're moving towards a decentralized world. Decentralization is the antithesis of centralization. It is defined as the transfer of control of an activity or organization to several local offices or authorities rather than one single one, meaning the power is distributed. So instead of that system we have there, we have it like this. Whereas instead of there being a single point, like a pyramid, where it's up top, everyone involved under certain regulations that are put in place, they all have decision-making power on the system in the middle. All these impact this. Where it was, this impacted all these. Okay. And that would be the difference between a centralized and a decentralized system. Okay. And you can see if in a decentralized system, like I just showed you, since there are so many individuals involved in making key decisions, it is much harder for there to be a single point of failure. Whereas there's not one individual who makes all the decisions. You can even think of this, think of it like with a family. If there is one individual in the family who makes all the decisions, brings in all the money, does literally everything, if that individual isn't capable of doing that, if they're out of the picture for X amount of time, then everyone under them they're subject to whatever consequences come from that. Whereas if it's distributed, if you have more than one head of household, if you have other individuals who are supporting and playing different positions, then there is no single point of failure. One can step out and there are others who are able to fill in and do X, Y, Z. So decentralized systems, they don't have gatekeepers or a single point of failure, and they allow unknown or untrusted parties to transact together on a peer-to-peer infrastructure, meaning that this is a trustless economy. I don't have to know you and you don't have to know me for us to all participate on the network and make transactions and voting decisions that are based upon the ultimate good for the vision of the network. What are the most well-known decentralized networks today? The internet. We're using it right now. It's decentralized. People all over the world. It has no single point of failure. It's not owned by one entity. Everyone participates in it and it's distributed globally. Bitcoin and other open permissionless networks, they're all decentralized. So the characteristics of decentralized systems and some of the advantages would be that transactions take place without intermediaries. It's peer-to-peer, from me to you. It's distributed. The network and its participants are distributed nationwide. It's reliable, significant amount of replication. It's not a hard system to follow. It's censorship resistant. No party controls the flow of data. You cannot censor a decentralized system. No one has that power. It may be public, and transactions may be publicly available and verifiable, meaning you're able to just log onto the internet, see all the transactions that are happening. It may be open and permissionless, and all of these maybes, they vary depending upon the blockchain and reference. So anyone may be able to participate in the network, like you are. If you wanted to hop onto, per se, whatever network you chose, participate, you could. Immutable. Transactions may be permanently recorded and or unalterable. So after X amount of time of the transactions being put into ledger, you are not able to go back and change it. The airplane flying over. Disadvantages. Secure. Majority of participants must be benevolent, otherwise not. Fast. Typically, much less so than equivalent centralized systems. In the context of blockchain, the limitations of the centralized systems are summarized by a term known as the blockchain trilemma, and that would be scalability, security, and decentralization. That is the blockchain trilemma. The disadvantages were proposed by Vitalik Buterin, who is one of the creators of Ethereum, and it states that blockchains by Dessing, I'm saying that right, Dessing or Deasing, it can only be scalable and secure, but not decentralized. Can be secure and decentralized, but not scalable, and can be scalable and decentralized, but not secure. So it's an oversimplification of mutually exclusive choices made by developers, users, speculators, etc., on which trade-offs they want to put in place in order to prioritize others. So you can have, ideally, they would say you could have a scalable and secure blockchain, but it would not be actually decentralized. Or you could have a secure and decentralized blockchain, but it would not actually be scalable. Or you could have a scalable and decentralized blockchain, but would not actually be secure. The future of blockchain, they say, will not be 100% decentralized. And the first generation of blockchains has been characterized by expectations about full decentralization and disintermediation. But those expectations are frequently inflated, meaning people have these grandiose ideas about decentralization and how it would work. But often when put into practice, it's much harder than it seems. 2. Next on our agenda is innovation and the process of creative destruction. So understanding innovation. Innovation, it's a well-defined topic, meaning the implementation of something new that generates value. There are different types of innovation. Some blockchain applications might fall under incremental sustaining or disruptive innovation. Some, as a whole, is a discontinuation from the status quo, providing solutions to problems we didn't know even existed, and introducing markets and products we didn't even know were possible. But them themselves are entering into a niche we didn't even know was there until they entered it. And along with technologies like the personal computer, the internet, and artificial intelligence, it's an example of a radical innovation. There are 4 types of innovation. Remember these: sustaining, the significant improvement on a product that aims to sustain the position in an existing market. Then there's disruptive, technology or new business model that disrupts the existing model. Then there's incremental, gradual, continuous improvements on existing products and services. Then there is radical, technological breakthrough that transforms industries and often can create a new market. How did the internet revolutionize the world? Think about it. The internet was another radical innovation that changed the world through a process known as creative destruction. The term is used to describe the dismantling of long-standing practices to make way for new innovation. Creative destruction is thought of as a driving force of capitalism. Okay, so first, technology creates a new foundational infrastructure, internet democratizing exchange of information. Initially, we think about moving existing businesses to the new infrastructure, from brick and mortar to business or business to customer commerce. But then 2 things happen. First, disintermediation, which is creative destruction. Irrelevant players that won't reinvent themselves get eliminated or pivot. Then there's cybermediation. It's the new business model, which could have existed earlier, and we can think of Instagram, Netflix, Airbnb, etc. These are the new business models that are in place, your Uber, etc. How will blockchain revolutionize our world? Well, first, technology creates a new foundational infrastructure. The internet democratizing the exchange of information. We think about existing businesses and the new infrastructure, the business to business, the business to commerce, or the business to customer commerce. And then when we look at it from the perspective of blockchain democratizes exchange of value and trust. Initially, we think about moving the existing business to the new infrastructure, from an e-commerce to a blockchain-enabled commerce, where everything's publicly verifiable on the open blockchain, of course, the public ones. But then 2 things happen with blockchain. In the creative destruction process, the relevant players that won't reinvent themselves or pivot to blockchain, they get eliminated. And then the new business models crop up left and right. Stage 4, disintermediation. Who becomes irrelevant with blockchain? Well, a blockchain allows untrusted parties to reach consensus on a shared digital history without a middleman. So who gets removed from this? The middleman. It becomes peer-to-peer. So who is the middleman in most situations? Well, as far as assets, currency, property, deposits, liabilities, loans, mortgages, the middleman generally is banks. central banks. This is why banks are in mind of creating central bank digital currencies. They're natively digital, they're legal tender, and they're stable by design, and they're backed by the money in the bank. They can incorporate features that do not exist in today's money, such as programmability and smart contracts. And it will also result in things such as nano payments, such as sending fractionals, whereas you could send $1, you could probably send a couple of cents in the form of digital currency. Machine-to-machine economies and novel monetary policy tools. But also, it's a new infrastructure for digital payments. It's replacing slow to innovative RTGSs. It's open, neutral payment architecture. It's fast, innovative, and competitive. So the new infrastructure can facilitate the settlement of not only money, but also other financial assets, and towards tokenization of financial assets such as securities, commodities, and others. There are a lot of questions that have to be answered first, as far as the architecture, whether it's token or account-based, centralized, decentralized, or hybrid, whether it's blockchain-based, what type of security protocols are in place, and how its operability will be looking, and the policies that have to be in place to supply controls, privacy and surveillance, remuneration, and the systemic risk that will be in play. Next, we have cyber mediation. So which new business models will blockchain enable? A blockchain allows untrusted parties to reach consensus on a shared digital history without a middleman. It's going to enable the untrusted parties. We create a trustless economy. Okay, you don't have to trust the next individual to understand that whatever transaction you put into play, as long as you follow the rules, the systemic implementation of the blockchain, such as being able to send transactions wallet to wallet, as long as you're following all the systems that are already put in place, according to how they're put in place, there's nothing you have to worry about. You have to worry about the middleman. What applications can we build on the blockchain? So we can think of incremental, offering marginal improvements on existing products or services. We can think of the sustaining, meaning offering significant improvements that will shift the power dynamic within existing markets. We can think of the disruptive, meaning enabling new products and business models that will entirely disrupt existing markets, which I'm here for. I like disruptive technologies. And radical, which will enable business models and applications so novel that they lie beyond our current imagination. So we can think of businesses that we don't think of normally, something that will pop up in a niche we didn't even know needed to be serviced, and it will apply to that niche, and it will be in a category of its own. So we can think of the current systems we have in place. The current business model is kind of boring, and the incremental and sustaining innovations that will pop up in blockchain, such as supply chain management being on the blockchain, health applications on the blockchain, energy applications on the blockchain. These are more of those incremental and sustaining innovations that we'll see pop up, typically applied to big industries, in my opinion. So blockchain for disruptive and radical innovations, these are the more exciting things, in my opinion, IMO. So we will increasingly see native blockchain applications and things that could not have been built before blockchain. So some aspects of DeFi, decentralized finance, some aspects of NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and central bank digital currencies. Radical innovations will entirely transform the landscape in ways that we cannot imagine. We can think of decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAO, decentralized infrastructure, some aspects of decentralized markets, some aspects of DeFi, decentralized finance, a convergence of AI, artificial intelligence, IoT, Internet of Things, and blockchain. We're going to see the tip of the iceberg, honestly and truly. It's just getting started. So some of the examples we have in place: decentralized finance, where there's lending, borrowing, or liquidity provision, asset and portfolio management, claims and royalties. There's decentralized infrastructure, the internet of value and self-sovereign identities, decentralized markets, data and prediction markets, smart property, capital markets, market-to-market commerce. Then there's decentralized organizations, DAOs, digital collectives, unmediated voting, and on-chain analytics. DeFi, creating money Legos. lending and borrowing platforms to stablecoins and tokenized Bitcoin, the DeFi ecosystem has launched an expansive network of protocols and financial instruments. Lending, borrowing, and liquidity provision. Most well-known DeFi protocols today enable algorithmic autonomous interest rate setting by having smart contracts automatically match borrowers and lenders to calculate interest rates based on the ratio of borrowed to supplied assets. There's asset portfolio management, expensive and fraught with risk. Trade processing and settlement is a complex industry with lots of intermediaries, brokers, custodians, clearers, settlers, ready for the DeFi disruption. Claims. Moving insurance claims management to smart contract-based systems with self-executable and self-enforceable transactions that will revolutionize the current system, which is largely manual and error-prone and fraudulent, or fraud-laden. Royalties. Redesigning music and other royalty management schemes toward decentralized, self-executable systems and down to the level of their atomic elements. DeFi brings programmability, interoperability, transparency, and self-custody in the management of financial assets and personal data. Interestingly, the ultimate result of DeFi might be another source of centralization, making the world's global financial industry on the top of common software infrastructure. Decentralized infrastructure, creating the next WWW, the Internet of Value. Blockchain enables a new kind of internet, from the Internet of Information to the Internet of Value. Even the basic Internet architecture is ripe for disruption. Okay, the applications such as decentralized DNS, which is domain name services. You can buy your domain, your name as a domain, and use it as a website. You can use it as a form of or a wallet for you to receive payments. There's self-sovereign identities, SSIs. We've used the blockchain infrastructure to solve the identity fraud problem of the current internet. This intermediating identity verification will create multi-source and multi-verifier digitally signed credentials that will ultimately use some form of zero-knowledge proofs to verify identities. Interestingly, SSIs may prove to be more relevant and commercially useful in identifying objects, not humans, on the IoT, or Internet of Things, creating a new industrial economy as far as decentralized organizations. Business. Smart contracts enable a wave of algorithmic governance, enabling new forms of industrial organization that supersede archaic, hierarchical, human decision-making forms of business. So whereas it's that top-down infrastructure where there are a couple of people in place deciding what happens in X, Y, Z environment, set things up in smart contracts, whereas things have to meet certain conditions in order for it to be executed. And once these are put in place, it's hard to stop and hard to manipulate. Decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs, are new forms of spontaneous or semi-spontaneous organizations emerging, and they include digital collectors, where you can get a large group of individuals who pool finances or whatever, and they have smart contracts set in place where they vote on decisions made, and upon the voting reaching a certain consensus, the smart contract will then put into place whatever decision is made without human error. So institutions will be using this as well for unmediated voting. They can provide a level of security and incorruptibility that might improve civic engagement, participation, and democratic processes. I'm looking forward to seeing smart contracts being used in our government voting systems, which, as you know, are prone to corruption and error. Decentralized markets, creating the commerce of the future. So there's data and prediction markets, and they enable transactions and price discovery for either commercially unexploited or, conversely, centrally overexploited data points. So we're able to monetize users' personal data and social media platforms, whereas right now, people like Google, they're able to use your information and sell it to buyers for them to put out ads. They're creating industry-wide secure data exchange networks in healthcare and other sectors, and leveraging the wisdom of crowds to create more efficient forecasting markets and develop oracles to connect blockchains to the outside world. Smart property, from cars to homes, the economy of the future will be built atop an infrastructure of decentralized, blockchain verifiable Internet of Things infrastructure. It allows for digital property management and ownership transfer, where if you own a car or house or some other type of asset, you're able to verify your ownership on the blockchain and or transfer the ownership of that on the blockchain, where everything is publicly verifiable on a digital ledger, creating the commerce of the future. It's beautiful. Capital markets will redefine the ways in which capital is invested in terms of who can invest, democratizing access, but also on what can be invested in fractional ownership, new marketable instruments. So if we put something on the blockchain, we can have fractional ownership. You put your car on the blockchain right now and put it open tokens and for others to invest in, they can have fractional ownership of that vehicle. Early examples include ICOs, IEOs, and STOs, which changed the rule of capital raising in the industrial economy. Tokenization will extend the breadth, depth, and reach of capital markets. So blockchain is not alone in enabling digital transformation. There's distributed ledgers, of course, blockchain. There's artificial intelligence, and there's the Internet of Things. And in all these categories, we have robotics, augmented virtual reality, 3D printing, molecular nanotechnology, new materials, energy storage, autonomous vehicles, synthetic biology, and quantum computing. Now we dive into tokenization. So everything up until now has been about tokenization. Bitcoin in 2009 being the first native token on the blockchain. Altcoins in 2010, 2011, which are native tokens, each on its own blockchain. Remember, altcoin is alternative coin. Covered coins, non-native tokens on the Bitcoin blockchain, 2012, 2013. Smart contracts went from ETH, and then they started to explode from there. And other platforms now have their own smart contracts. And we have ICOs, STOs, and IEOs. So tokenization is about using distributed ledger technology to prove one's ownership of real-life assets or rights. Physical assets like securities, real estate are subject to this. Digital rights such as license rights, access rights, intellectual property rights, future income rights. Some of the benefits include tokens are trivially created, stored, and traded. There's liquid global markets can be created for almost everything, including for fractional ownership of products. And some of the challenges are that it's not decentralized, and intermediaries will always be needed for non-native assets. So always need intermediaries for things such as housing or cars. An alternative classification, well, tokens can be thought of as containers. A token can be either loaded with a right and represents a real-world asset, or a token container can also be empty, it's a native asset. Decentralization does not destroy intermediaries, it replaces them. Okay. New intermediaries needed for all non-native assets, token generators, token issuers, token validators, token custodians, token exchange service providers, token identity service providers. There's the Liechtenstein Blockchain Act of 2020, and it foresees no less than 10 different roles and associated registration licensing requirements. Personal requirements, organizational requirements, minimum capital requirements, and internal control mechanisms, due diligence requirements such as KYC, AML, CTF, securitizing a physical asset such as tokenizing real estate. Today's real estate markets are slow, they're expensive, and they're monolithic. So property owners cannot monetize part of their property. Property investors need a large amount of capital. And the real estate markets are inefficient and illiquid, and transactions are rare, and price discovery is broken. This can be fixed with the blockchain. So real estate can be treated as the next stock market. Platforms, exchanges that bring together property owners and investors. Each property is split into blockchain-based tokens that securely represent ownership of a fraction of the asset. Owners then list part of their property and monetize it by selling tokens. Investors then acquire tokens and receive rental income while they hold them. They will also benefit from asset appreciation. The platform operates as a property manager. Income and expenses are securely and transparently recorded and distributed on the blockchain. I actually know some platforms, one of them will be Honeybricks, where you can go in and invest fractionally into real estate via cryptocurrency. Some of the benefits are owners can sell ownership rights to arbitrary percentages of the property. Investors can acquire property ownership rights anywhere in the world with minimal capital and expenses. And liquid and efficient markets for global real estate will be created. So let's give an example. Say Alice owns a Frankfurt property for $200,000. Tokenize the property into 100,000 tokens, each valued at $2. So Alice needs liquidity of $20,000. So she enlists 10,000 tokens in the platform, effectively putting down 10% of the property for sale. Bob wants to invest in Frankfurt properties, but his total capital is only $5,000. So he cannot buy any property in the city, but he can acquire 2,500 tokens of Alice's properties, or he can diversify into other properties. And now he owns 2.5% of the property, so he receives 2.5% of the property's rental income, as long as he holds the tokens. Bob may decide to sell his tokens in the secondary market, and the price of the token will fluctuate to indicate the movement of real estate prices in Frankfurt and in particular properties. Tokenizing future income streams. People need funding at their early or middle career stages to pursue their goals. Athletes need support for training, equipment, traveling. Artists need to produce, promote their work, and go on tour. Students need to finance their studies. But the financing options are limited generally. What if talent could issue equity? Tokenizing ownership of one's future incomes. Platforms that tokenize career prospects, future income using blockchain, enabling investors to fund talent, investing in their future achievements and income, enable talent to build up careers or insure against future risk, and markets that bring together investors and talent can be created. How would this work? Well, Alice's promising tennis player is a promising tennis player at her early career stages. She needs $100,000 for equipment, training, traveling, and tennis tournaments. She signs up on a platform and builds a profile, signs a contract with the platform. 100,000 tokens, each valued at $1, are issued. So tokens are then sold to investors, and Alice receives $100,000, while investors get the right to 30% of her future income for a fixed period. So Alice invests the funds in professional training and participation in events around the world. After a few years, she's developed into a professional player earning $300,000 a year. Of this income, 30%, which is $90K annually, is distributed to token holders via the blockchain platform. Investors then receive income, dividends, and can sell tokens, which will fluctuate in value according to income and maturity. Our conclusion would be blockchain is the next step in digital transformation. They're revolutionary and foundational technology. They're the next internet layer, allowing for decentralized flow of value instead of just information. They will unleash a wave of creative destruction in the old internet economy, replacing current intermediaries with new ones. As a foundational technology, blockchain can be applied almost everywhere. But the really exciting applications are going to be the native ones. Okay. These include decentralized finance, decentralized infrastructure, decentralized organization, and decentralized markets. Tokenization is the next blockchain frontier. Tokenizing physical assets like real estate, and tokenizing virtual assets like future income streams. It's great information for the everyday individual and for the everyday investor. At the retail level, definitely. But thank you all for tuning in. Excited to be sharing this information with you all, and I hope you learned something of value.